Hey, revolutionaries. I'm excited to bring you this week's episode with Jem Fuller, who helps people create habitual perspectives that bring flow and success. That's right, flow and success. And, I love talking to Jem because this idea of flow really speaks to me because, I'm a musician. That's one of the things I do, and I do a lot of improvisation, jazz improv. And we talk about it when you're doing improvisation, when you're flowing, when you're in this flow state. Call it flow state, where you're not really thinking about exactly what you're doing. You're just, all the stuff that you've learned over the years and all the harmonies and patterns and chord structure and scales and all that kind of stuff. You're not specifically thinking about that. You're just letting it flow out as a conversation, essentially, right? And responding to the musicians around you and the audience and all those kinds of things. And in terms of, mindset and business and entrepreneurship, Jem is one of those guys that just understands this flow state concept and helps you bring it about through, mastering those habits that you need to have. You know what I mean? So anyways, we connected on that. And what was funny is he's got a very interesting background about when he left high school and why, the things that impacted him early in his life, and how he took off traveling. He's originally from Australia. Took off traveling to Asia, to India, and really was trying to escape and find himself. And I guess maybe in researching and talking to him early on, I had this reference in my mind to call him a guru. And so I said, "Hey man, he's the guru of this," and I found out right away that he's not a guru. So you'll just have to listen to the episode why, but that's not how he would describe himself. Anyways, I can't wait for you to listen to this episode. But before we get there, real quick, I wanted to mention that this past week, literally like 2 days ago, I finally confirmed the design for my basement. Yes, the design for the basement, which I haven't mentioned much recently in the last few podcasts. And I told everyone I was going to put a bunch of designs up on Facebook, which I'm actually going to do now to see what you guys think. But you know what? You know why I didn't? Well, I haven't been talking about it because basically I was scared. I was afraid to share this idea. I'm afraid to even do it, really, because it just represents a bigger change for me or moving forward in a direction I want to go in. But I still find myself fearful sometimes. Creating that change for myself. And I know if you're listening out there, you know exactly what I'm talking about. When you really try to, dream up where you'd want to be or some fantasy that you have to you want to go after it in life. It can be hard sometimes because you're not trained to necessarily go after your dreams all the time. Anyways, I I finally confirmed the design. I'm waiting for the specs from my designer so that I can send them to the manufacturer to start getting this process underway, officially kicked off. And it's been a journey, like a real journey to, just in my mind, to conceive what the space should look like and why. And I thought it should be busier and more colorful and wild. That's when I first started. I wanted to do something really impactful and kind of crazy looking. But then I came to the conclusion that, maybe it's... maybe it should be a little bit more mellow or a little more neutral. And so we'll let whatever is going to happen in the space, we'll let that be the more creative part rather than leading it in a certain direction. And, I got this philosophy or concept after going through this process. You kind of have to go down this journey. But in recently watching this series by Rick Rubin, based around Rick Rubin and his music studio he's been recording at, Shangri-La on the West Coast. It's in, I think it's in Malibu somewhere. And in that space, he designed it as really just a white box, and there's almost no clutter in the studio. Where a lot of studios I've been in and seen, there's always massive just instruments and cables and just clutter around. And a lot of these places can be old and funky and a lot of things on the walls and that kind of stuff. But this space is totally opposite of that. And it got me thinking, like, you know what? I like that idea because, it kind of lets, or maybe forces in a way, you to be more creative. When you really get quiet, maybe not creative, but it lets more of actually you and your concept come out, because you're not being distracted by other inputs. Anyways, I'm going to put some of these images on the Facebook page if people are interested in checking them out. It's kind of fun. So you can go to facebook.com/JimJim'sReinventionRevolution podcast, I think is the actual address there. So yeah, you can check it out. So that's all I got for now. Remember, if you're listening out there and if any of the episodes are impacting you or you're having fun with it, share it with someone. Turn someone else onto the podcast, and I'm sure they'll thank you forever and love you forever. Hey, phone. And so let's get to this week's episode with Jem.
Welcome to Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast, the show that explores reinvention in the digital age as it relates to career, creativity, and technology. Stay tuned for interviews with professionals, entrepreneurs, and creatives that have reimagined success and are making a pivot. If you'd like to listen to the entire back catalog, visit JimJim'sReinventionRevolution.com for instant access. And now, here's your host, Jim.
Yeah, hey everybody, hey, it's Jim. Welcome to episode 93 of Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast. And I'm talking today with Jem Fuller, and we're talking about resilience and conscious communication. So Jem, welcome to the Reinvention Revolution.
Hey Jim, thank you so much for having me on.
Well, thanks for getting up early. I would say good morning, but do they say good morning in Australia, or do they just say good day for morning?
No, we say good morning. Yeah,
okay, because I only hear that phrase like good day.
Yeah, I think we say g'day for kind of, after you've had some breakfast and your coffee, and
okay,
and then probably it's g'day.
Okay, I gotcha. All right. Well, good morning. I know you're up early over there because of the time situation. But look, before we dig into things here, for people that aren't familiar with you, and kind of just as a description of what you do for everyone, you are a guru, a Maharishi of sorts that helps people create habitual perspectives that bring flow and success. So before we get started, can you maybe just flesh that out for everybody, what that means to you and how that helps your clients and what you do for them?
Yeah, sure. Before I do, it's interesting to notice how we get triggered to certain words, which is our own stuff, right? But I've got my own stuff around the word guru.
Oh, really? Okay.
I don't think of myself as a guru.
I gotcha. Okay.
I spent a lot of years in India.
Oh, okay. Well, you have a different feeling for it then. Okay.
Yeah, and I still go to India a lot. And I just remember back in the hippie days, and all of these lost souls seeking their guru and sitting down and listening to this one person tell them how to find spiritual enlightenment. And I still have leftover echoes of these triggers to that.
Right,
so
I got you.
No, I don't see myself as a guru. I do, however, work with people to help create habitual perspectives and practices that bring more ease, more flow, more success. And I work with executive and senior leaders in organisations across the public, so in government, in the private sector, also in the not-for-profit sector.
Mm-hmm.
And I think really, this book that's just come out, well, not just James Clear's book that came out, Atomic Habits in 2019, but it's now becoming very popular globally, but a lot in Australia as well, is singing the same song that I've been singing to my clients for years, which is that it's fine to understand, a healthy perspective or a healthy practice that gets us better results, but it's much better to create it as a habit. When things become habitual, that's where we come back to. That's the level that we return to. So, yeah, I believe that if we can train ourselves to have the discipline of a positive perspective, and then also start some daily habits that improve our functionality, that over time we just get better results.
I like that. Well, yeah, I like that you want to create this habit. It's about the process of, teaching yourself that. I really like the word flow. When I was reading it and I was thinking about it, I'm in, since I have more time on my hands these days, I guess through the pandemic, is part of what I do is I'm a musician. So I play jazz music, and it's funny that we talk about this flow state when you're improvising and when you're not in flow state. And so when you're like I am right now, I've been taking some lessons and I'm trying to really up my game in terms of, harmony and theory and patterns and different things I want to learn, develop new skills, and that takes you out of flow state. So like when I go back to improvise, I have all this new information in my head that I haven't fully integrated yet, right? These new habits, these new things I'm trying, and when I go to play, it feels very clunky and weird. I'm not flowing, right?
Yeah.
Because I haven't mastered it
so
yet.
True.
So
true.
It just kind of made me think about, like, when you're working with clients and trying to get them to develop new habits, I think that's the goal, right? To get it so ingrained, create that habit that's so consistent that they're flowing with it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you said it perfectly. It's the 4 stages of learning. Before you learn something new, you're in the state of unconscious incompetence. So you don't know that you don't know.
I like that.
How to do that, right?
I never heard that before. I love that phrase. Yeah.
Yeah. So unconscious incompetence is, so there's a young kid who doesn't know that they don't know how to drive a car. They just, they haven't thought about it yet.
Right.
And then as they approach the time in their life when they're going to get their driver's license and they start learning how to drive, they move into conscious incompetence.
Okay, right.
So they know that they don't know how to drive a car, and they see all these pedals on the ground, and they see the gear shift and the wheel, and they're like, wow, I don't know how to do this. Then they learn how to do it, and we move into conscious competence, which means we can drive the car, but we have to focus all of our attention on it. So we still can't be in flow state. We're still having to focus on changing gears. You're still having to focus when you're playing the new scales in the jazz piece. You're still having to focus on the notes.
Right.
And then slowly we move into unconscious competence. So we drive the car without even thinking about it. Right. And then we can start to experience flow. And so when those scales become a body memory for you, which instrument are you playing when you're doing this?
I play saxophone. That's my main instrument, saxophone.
Uh-huh. Wow. I did saxophone all the way through high school.
Oh, you did? Oh, cool.
Yeah. That was
so
my
really
instrument. I even did it. No, well, yeah, I do. I have a memory, a distant memory, all those decades ago.
Yeah, for
sure. But I love the saxophone. So when those new scales become, a body memory, you're not thinking about them. They're just in your fingers and in your breath. Then you can move into flow state. And it's the same with anything that we do, whether it's in leadership or whether it's as a technician or, whether it's in the art of conscious communication. So, some of the things that we can learn around communicating more consciously to begin with when we first learn them and practice them, it's a bit clunky.
Right.
And then it's only with repetition over time that we can move into flow state.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I really like that phrase. And I like how you put that. I never heard that. Unconscious incompetence and conscious competence, and all the combinations. That's a great way to describe it, and that's exactly how you feel too when you when you're out there trying to learn new things or trying to reinvent yourself in some way. Cool. All right. Well, let's dig into this resilience piece because I wanted to pull out a couple things that you've recently been working on that you came up with over the last couple of years. And one of them was this resilience kind of course or concept that you're teaching people. And it's curious to me because you started this before the pandemic hit. It sounded like you started developing this course. And I want to get your thoughts on, first of all, why you decided to develop it then and how you think about it now with having gone through the pandemic that we're still kind of in at the tail end of, hopefully.
Yeah, sure. Look, it was happy coincidence. I was chatting with a potential client. It was actually Ambulance Victoria. So the state that I live in is Victoria. Mm-hmm. And the ambulance system that runs in our state here, I was chatting with one of the head psychologists there about potentially, what service I could provide or what product I could provide that would help their paramedics. And this psychologist said, look, we really struggle with our paramedics' resilience. It's a tough job. There's a lot of trauma. There's post-traumatic stress. The turnover rate of paramedics is really high. We would really love to be able to support them and give them something to help them with their resilience.
Interesting.
So I said, okay, great. I'll go and build an online course for resilience. Like you said, this was before the pandemic. Mm-hmm. So I built this online course in personal resilience as opposed to organizational resilience. So there's two ways that we come at resilience, which I can talk to if you want me to later. But in answer to your question, I built this online course in personal resilience, launched the course, released it, started getting students into this course, and then the pandemic came.
Amazing.
And so it became, the timing of it was really quite something. And then through as the pandemic became more and more deeply ingrained for all of us, the course started to help more and more people.
Right. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. I mean, serendipitous, obviously, with the pandemic, but I think it's something that, during the pandemic, like in 2020 and 2021, like, when I kicked off this year, I was thinking about 2021 and how like uncomfortable a year it was for me. So like the pandemic year, I think I was, personally sort of more in shock, and you were just like shock and awe and reading the news and trying to figure out what the heck's going on, right? 2021 was more like, okay, you're kind of through the shock stage, at least I was, and you're trying to process and figure out how life is going to be different. And everything was just uncomfortable for me because I decided to move. Like there were other things because of the pandemic that happened. I ended up selling my house and I moved and I did all these other things. I was like reinventing myself again in another way, but it just made my whole year uncomfortable because I was out of my routine. I didn't know where anything was anymore in my life or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's when I started thinking more and more, even like about this resilience part where it's like, man, it's this cascading time of a couple years of this thing building up, and it's like just interesting, I guess, experience of life of just having to deal with this really a long kind of undertow of this stress. You know what I mean? That's always there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting, isn't it? Because if you think about our resilience, which relies on our energy reserves,
right?
Yeah. So our resilience is our ability to not only bounce back through adversity, but to potentially thrive through adversity, right? This is our resilience. And when you think about it, so much of it is psychological, emotional, mental, because if you think about your physical energy reserves through the pandemic, so for you in 2021 where you felt really uncomfortable, apart from moving house where you had to pick up some boxes,
right,
the rest of the year, you're not physically exerting yourself any more than you were in any other year.
Right.
It's not like you're running a marathon every day. Physically, it's you just kind of waking up and having breakfast and going about your day. But we feel so drained and our resilience gets really tested and we get exhausted and people get run down and, and feel weary and lose the reserves to get up and face that day again, and this has been widespread globally. So I just think it's interesting to note that our resilience has a lot to do with our mental, emotional, our psychological state of being.
Right. Yeah. Well, it really does. And it's like, I find myself, like, well, maybe I'll go work out or play more music. There's things I can do to kind of make myself feel better in the moment. But it's this long buildup of the psychological, emotional things that you just, to me, the way I can explain it was just being uncomfortable for such a long period of time, where hopefully I feel like I'm getting a little bit more into a routine now, and the pandemic is kind of fading into the background, where maybe it's like, I can see some relief. But for a long time there, it was like just uncomfortable, and it makes you, I just think people should think a little bit more about how to be resilient, or just focus on their mental part or the mental part of it. So it's cool that course came along at the right time. When you were developing it, did you have the intention to start moving your business more online? Because I noticed that before you were running retreats and, doing a lot of travel, and, Australia's kind of isolated perhaps. I don't know, where your markets are, where you like to engage with people. That can be maybe an issue, and so you maybe need to travel outside of Australia for business purposes and such. What were you thinking before the pandemic hit? Did you think I need to move all this stuff online?
Yeah, great question. And to a certain degree, yes. Not all my stuff. I was looking to move online purely because I wanted to, start to have some scalability into my business.
I see. Yeah, that makes sense.
As a solopreneur, I think they call us.
Right.
But working on my own, there's only one of me, and my clients want me.
Right.
You know, I started a company back in the day because I run international retreats, and because of the risk level involved, some of my retreats have a high risk level because of what we do and where we go.
Mm-hmm.
So I had started a company, and there was a brand, Leaders in Life, and the idea was that I would bring on other facilitators and that I could slowly step back off the tools and have other people facilitate these programs. And I found out over a few years that that wasn't going to work because people didn't want other facilitators, they wanted me. So I had to step out from behind that company brand and just be my own brand, which was fine. But then as a business owner looking to grow a business, you face that problem of, wow, there's only one of me.
Right.
Okay, so how do we scale? So the idea was that we build online courses that are have a certain amount of evergreenness.
Sure.
So that they can sit there as a set and forget course and people can purchase the course. So I had that idea before the pandemic. But most of my bread and butter work, I work with leaders as a coach, one-to-one, and then also running workshops for their teams. That was predominantly face-to-face. And the speaking work that I do, so going and speaking at events, that was face-to-face.
Right.
So when all of that shut down, I had a moment of going, oh, wow, my income has just stopped.
Right. Yeah. A lot of people, it's like, whoa.
Whoa, yeah, like overnight, stopped, gone, income stopped.
Down.
It's like, wow, okay. So we were quite lucky here in Australia. Lucky in one way that our government financial support was pretty immediate and substantial enough to pay the rent and feed the kids.
Right.
And unlucky in other ways. The state where I live, we had the longest lockdowns anywhere in the world. We were pretty much locked down for 2 years.
Yeah, it was pretty rough. Australia, just travel in and out of the country, and just everything was pretty locked down comparatively.
Couldn't leave the country. Yeah. And if you were an Australian overseas, they just abandoned you.
Yeah, they wouldn't even let you back in. I thought that was insane.
Oh, jeez. Don't get me talking about it.
Right. I mean, the U.S. was like, if you're a citizen, you can come back, of course. I mean, you know.
Right?
Australia was like, no, stay away.
But yeah, you're abandoned.
Right. Yeah, we won't go there. That's another podcast.
That's another podcast.
Right.
No, but so once I had, set up that financial support from the government.
Sure.
I remember in the June of 2020, I was sitting on the couch. I just realized that I can get this financial support, and I heard myself thinking something that wasn't going to work. And I heard myself thinking, that's okay. I've got this financial support. I'll just ride it out. It'll be a few months, and I'll just sit here and I'll ride it out. And then once we're through this, over the next few months, the pandemic will be gone, and then I can put my foot back on the pedal of my business and start, growing again.
Right.
And I heard myself thinking this, and caught myself and said, Jem, that thinking is not going to work. What you need to be thinking is, how can I be even more relevant now that we're in lockdown than I was before?
Right.
And so I took everything online and found a way to do that, and found a way to be valuable to my clients and to reach new clients. And I doubled my business in the first financial year of the pandemic. I literally doubled my revenue. Yeah. And now we're halfway through, a little bit more than halfway through this financial year, and I'm set to double it again. So awesome. I'm very lucky.
Yeah, that's great.
Very lucky.
Well, obviously a silver lining there. I mean, who knew that this was going to happen? But like you said, if you just double down and focus on, hey, what do people need now in the moment, right? People always need these types of resources. So that's cool that you were able to pivot. Was one of the pivots this new book about conscious communication for men? So I noticed that this was another recent offering that came out from you. Tell me about that. Was that something that came out of the pandemic kind of era for you? Like you had some downtime, so you thought, hey, it's a good time to write a book, or?
Yeah, I mean, I'd been planning on writing a book for many years, I've actually even started writing a few different books, but I wasn't really sure, which one was going to land. And then I somehow came upon writing about communication when we were locked down, and communication was really, it was hard for people. How do I communicate with my teams now that we can't just have the accidental bump into you in the kitchen making a coffee and touch base and see how you are? How do I communicate effectively with my team when we're all dispersed and logging in through some, virtual platform. How do I keep my team engaged? So predominantly I was thinking about my clients initially, but then it became more broad, and I started to watch what was happening globally with, the different groups identifying with their politic, identifying with their ideology so vehemently that they were shouting at each other, and still are.
Yeah.
You've got groups of people just shouting at each other online, and this whole cancel culture.
Right.
You say one word incorrectly, and we don't care what your intention was, and we don't care what the context was. We're going to ruin you. We are going to publicly cancel you.
Right.
It's like, whoa, wow, people, what are you doing?
It's a little bizarre. It's strange.
It's not helping. It's certainly not evolving us as humans.
Yeah.
Right. So I was like, wow, communication's really falling apart. And then also here in Australia, it was big news through the pandemic. Some of our senior politicians behaving in appalling ways, men behaving in appalling ways towards women, just completely unacceptable. So there was an uproar around that. And also just from my thousands and thousands of hours of coaching, knowing that more often than not, when people trip over, it's in communication.
Right.
Whether it's in an organization or whether it's in a relationship with your loved one. When we come to an impasse, an interpersonal impasse, more often than not, it's due to the communication or the lack thereof.
Right.
So I started writing about more conscious communication, and I had engaged a book writing mentor, and she said to me, Jem, you need to pick an audience. Your book is great, but it's very broad.
Right.
You need to pick an audience. And she said, look, I think men really could do with this book right now. So then I started to tailor the book towards men.
I see.
Hence it being called The Art of Conscious Communication for Thoughtful Men.
I see. Well, I think it makes sense. And, I'm sure everyone around the world is still feeling what you're describing there with the way people are shouting at each other and the politics. It seems like we've all receded into our egos. That's the way I think about it. It's like, when you're shouting at someone, you're not communicating, you're not even listening. You're just trying to tell them that you know what's right, or that you're afraid, like you're really just in fear or hurt by something. That you're just really inside your ego, and you can't, until you snap out of it, there's no communication. Maybe
it's so true.
That book can obviously, maybe help people, give them tools to figure that out for themselves, or create some of those habits, those habitual things, like you said, that keep you away from triggering that ego, right?
Yeah. I mean, you said it exactly, Jim. That's quite often when people are shouting at each other, or getting defensive, or listening but queuing up to speak.
Right.
To get their point of view into the conversation, to rebut what the other person was saying.
Right.
Or to strongly agree, but to strongly agree because I feel the same way too. Not because I'm seeking to understand you, but I just happen to feel the same thing as you, and so I very much agree with you, and I want to jump into this conversation and say, yeah.
Right. I love that.
So whether you're disagreeing or agreeing, if it's not truly seeking to understand, if it's just your own point of view, it's ego. That's exactly what it is.
Right.
And if we're more conscious of anything, we're more aware of it. So if you're more conscious in communication, you're more aware of the communication itself. What is the purpose of this communication?
Right.
It's not always literal. It's not always, I'm communicating with you because I've got some instructions I need you to understand, or some directions. It's not always very literal. Sometimes, your loved one might be venting emotionally, and they're heightened, and they're emotional, and they're just maybe even raising their voice at you. In that moment, it's not literally what they're saying that they're trying to communicate. They're trying to express a feeling.
Right. Oh, I like that. I like that right there. That's pretty interesting to, if you can be more of an observer when someone's really lashing out.
Yeah.
And maybe not pay as much attention to the words as to the emotion or feeling or their actions, actually. That's interesting. Completely.
If you're conscious in that communication, then rather than sitting there and getting defensive and taking everything literally.
Right.
Because your partner might be so upset in that moment that your partner is saying, you never do anything for me.
Right.
Right. Now, if you're sitting there literally and you're not conscious of the communication, if you're just in ego, you take those words literally, I never.
Yeah,
do
right.
anything for you? Are you kidding me? How ungrateful can you be? I do stuff for you all the time. You start to get defensive,
Right.
and then you bite back going, you don't appreciate me. I do things for you all the time. And that's where the conversation goes.
Right.
Right? But you missed the point.
Right. That's exactly right.
It wasn't literal. It was an expression of, in this moment right now, I'm feeling really upset because you didn't do that thing for me that I was really hoping you would do for me. It's an expression of how I'm feeling in this moment. If you're conscious of the communication, you'd get that.
Right.
You go, wow, she's really upset with me right now. That's the last thing I want. I love this woman. I don't want her upset.
Right.
So I'm going to just sit here, present, lean into this conversation, not shut the walls down and, kind of back away, or just say, I'm just going to give you some space until you cool down and leave. Not that.
Mm-hmm.
Just sit there and be even more present for her or him, whoever your partner is, and hear them. Hear what they're feeling.
Right.
And then lean into them and say, hey, I heard you. I heard you're really upset right now, and I get it. I get it. Yeah.
Right. Wow, what a great example. Yeah. I love it. Thanks, man. That's I mean, it's just what can I say? I mean, it's just fun to talk to someone who really has this, depth of knowledge and understanding and perspective that's out there. I mean, that's what I'm searching for. That's what I think people need, when they're thinking about pivoting and changing themselves internally. It always comes back to that mindset part. But, you start showing up different for others sometimes if you start changing.
Yeah.
And that can cause a lot of friction
and,
with this communication piece, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's applicable to every context. Just say you've got someone who's in your team, a rookie in the team.
Right.
And, you've brought them into the team culture, and you want them to feel safe, and you want them to feel like, they can, have ideas too, just because they're brand new. And so in a moment when you're sitting around the table and there's a problem that the team needs to solve, and you're spitballing, you're workshopping, you're just brainstorming ideas, right?
Right.
For you to be conscious that rookie is sitting there terrified to say anything because they don't want to look stupid. And when and if you create the space and you manage to encourage them to just have a crazy idea,
Right.
regardless of whether the idea is going to work or not. Now, you might be the expert, and you might know that we tried that idea 7 years ago and it doesn't work because of A, B, and C. But if you're more conscious of the communication itself right now, what's more important than whether this idea works or not is the communication to that rookie of, you are safe here to have crazy ideas.
Right. Right.
That's the communication. So that you go, awesome, hey, let's put that idea on the table and have a look at that idea. Thank you so much for having the courage to share a crazy idea, because genius comes from crazy ideas. In fact, every genius idea before it worked was crazy.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'm now going to have this kind of conversation with the rookie going, you're in the right place, man, because in this team, we want crazy ideas, right? Mm-hmm. Now I'm doing all of this, not because I think the idea is actually going to be something we implement, because we know that idea doesn't work already, but that's not the point of this communication. The point of this communication is for that rookie to feel safe.
Right. Make them feel valued. That's why we hired you. That's why you're here.
Completely.
Right. Yeah.
Because if you shut them down, then over time, they will just retreat, and then you will end up with, if it is a collaborative team environment, it'll be a two-dimensional collaborative team environment. It won't have depth. It won't be true collaboration. It won't be a team culture where people actually feel safe to look stupid or make mistakes.
Right. Exactly.
It won't. So,
Wow, that's great. Well, okay. So now if you haven't figured out already that Jem, even though he's not a guru, okay, has a lot of experience. He's not a guru. I'm going to tell you that. I know that by now.
Yeah.
He has got a lot of experience with this nuance, with understanding the mindset, and being an entrepreneur himself. But you weren't always in this lane, and so I want to kind of backtrack a little bit and figure out how you got here, because you have this interesting. I guess past, when you started out kind of getting into the world on your own, and before you kind of really got into the professional world, you were on your own for a bit. And it's, ever since we talked, it's been, I've been thinking about this in the back of my head. I forced myself not to ask you about it when we first talked, because I just wanted to ask you when we got on the podcast and started recording. But I really want to know what happened when you started to leave home. So tell people that are listening out there. So, you're growing up in Australia, you get to high school, and you're thinking like, okay, what's your next move out of high school?
In the last couple of years of high school, I had my sights set on being an actor. I wanted to be a famous actor. I wanted to be the next Mel Gibson, the Hollywood, the Australian Hollywood star. That's what I wanted to be when I was 16 and 17. When I was halfway through my last year of high school, my best friend, actually 5 days before my 18th birthday, my closest friend had an accident on his motorbike. I was bedside with him. He was on life support in a coma on my 18th birthday. And 5 days after my 18th birthday, the decision was made to turn off the machines and let him die. And that rocked me. That rocked my world. And I developed, a much more cynical kind of outlook on life than I'd had before that.
Right.
Anyway, so high school finished, and I just wanted to get as far away as possible from home, from my parents, from the private school that I went to, which I felt like a square peg in a round hole. And so I just jumped on a plane and flew to the other side of the world. And this was back in, the late 80s. So now in Australia, I don't know about where you are, man, but here they call it a gap year. So it's a done thing. You take a gap year after high school before university or college.
Well, I think that's a popular term now. I mean, back then, I think you would have been looked at as like, this guy's insane. What's he doing?
Yeah, I was just, what are you doing?
He's going to throw his life away. He's a loser, whatever it might be, right?
Yeah, I'm out of here.
But now it's like common to be, let's take a gap year. It's very sophisticated now.
Yeah, that's right. It wasn't sophisticated back then. I was a bum who was running away from everything. And then, and that became my passion right through my 20s and into my early 30s. I just wanted to be traveling the world and getting as far away from my normal paradigm as possible. I didn't understand it at the time, but I didn't want to spend time in America and Europe so much. I did travel around these places, but that's not where my passion was, because that was like home. Why do I want to spend time in America? It's like being in Australia.
Right.
I wanted to go to Pakistan and Afghanistan, and this is before the war, right? Mm-hmm. This is back in the 90s, remember? And I wanted to go to China and Tibet and India and all of Southeast Asia and places like this, places that were very, very different culturally. And it's interesting, over the decade plus of traveling, I was doing anything I could to fund my travels, to continue my travels. And so then I ended up, working as a tribal tattooist and a fire dancer and a kindergarten teacher in Taiwan for a year, or a volunteer in a third world country, a labourer, motorcycle courier. I've done so many different things,
That's interesting.
And I look back at everything that I've packed into my life, and I even sometimes go, wow, did I really fit all that in? I don't know how I fit all of that in.
Right.
But more importantly to me now, all of those years of immersion, because I kind of like I have this trigger to being called a guru. I'm like, no, don't call me that. Back then, I had the same trigger to being called a tourist. Like, no, I am not a tourist.
Interesting.
To me, a tourist comes in for a few days, takes some photos in front of the local iconic whatever it is, and then leaves.
Right.
And that's not the way I traveled. I saw myself as a traveler. I would go to a village or a town or a city, and I would spend at least a month. And I would want to immerse as much as possible. I wanted to just try and speak some of the local language, to eat the local food, to shop in the local market. That I really wanted to experience the culture and learn how to communicate with the people who were living there, who that was their day to day. And I look back now and this kind of drive that I had, this motivation or this passion about that was cross-cultural communication and connection.
Mm-hmm.
I was really driven to find what we've got in common. So just you're a devout Muslim in a tiny village in remote North Pakistan, and I grew up in a Christian family in a suburb in Melbourne, Australia, and we could not be culturally any more different. Let's sit down and break bread together and find out what we've got in common.
Right.
Wow. We do. We have a lot in common. Right.
Right.
And I used to love that. I still do. And now that translates into, with my work, quite literally helping the sales department and the compliance department realize, what have we got in common? We both work for the same organization.
Right.
We both want the same higher end outcome here. So let's stop this, dysfunctional fighting over stuff, and let's come together and collaborate. Let's harness the power of diversity, which is a phrase that I use. But quite literally, you've got a different point of view here to me, and it's in the difference where there's the potential for collaboration and solution to bigger problems. It's in the difference.
Mm-hmm.
So let's lean into that rather than argue about it. Let's lean into it and explore this space together, because we're both human. We both need to eat. We both need to feed our children. We both need shelter. We both need all this stuff. Let's work it out.
I see. Is the curiosity, like when you started traveling, obviously you had this impactful event early on, and you said, you know what, life might be meaning something different for you than most other people because of that, quote, trauma or whatever it might be, that impactful event. When you get going traveling and you're kind of on the land by yourself, and you have to like figure out how to feed yourself and integrate into the cultures that you're immersing yourself in, were you always naturally curious, or was it more of it like, did it take some time to crack your mind and mindset open, or were you very open to start with? How did you think about it?
No. I mean, look, I was open, but it took time as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when I left home at 18 and went to the other side of the world, I just wanted to get away from my parents so I could smoke weed and
right.
hang out.
They didn't understand me, whatever.
Beer.
You're kind of acting out a little bit.
Yeah. And so I was young and dumb and adventurous.
Right.
And over time of traveling, and then in my late 20s, I'd been living in London, squatting in abandoned buildings to begin with, and then renting eventually, but to save money to get back to India. And I had a full identity crisis. I had a full death of ego. I got to the point where I had no idea who I was and what I wanted to do and who I wanted to be with. And I ended up traveling around India for a year at that time, and immersing myself into the lower levels of the economic, social demographic in India. So coming across as a poor person, walking around barefoot, with a piece of material wrapped around a lungi and a t-shirt and nothing else. Mm-hmm. And I successfully did that. I disappeared into the fabric of their culture, and they viewed me either as a strange looking sadhu, and a sadhu over there is a man who forgoes all of his earthly possessions to walk around and seek enlightenment. Right. That's the premise of a sadhu. Most sadhus are actually guys who just smoke weed.
Right.
To be honest. So they either saw me as that, or they saw me as a hippie, a Western hippie who was pretty much doing the same thing. But both of those pigeonholes that they put me in were unattractive to them, and so they forgot about me, and the beggars stopped begging from me, and people stopped hassling me, and I disappeared into the fabric of their culture, that was my intention.
I see.
And then I had the opportunity to rebuild a sense of identity. So who do I want to be? Who am I? That was the first of two times that I had that breakdown. But so I looked, in answer to your question, in a very long answer to your question, I wasn't always, open and adventurous and on a mission to connect with people. That just kind of evolved.
I gotcha. Okay, interesting. And so after a few years of doing this and really, it's just amazing experience to have, to immerse yourself in all these cultures and challenge your belief systems and all those kind of things that go along with it. What was the thing that brought you back off the road and thought like, okay, is it just I'm getting older, or I just had enough of it, or whatever? Becoming a dad. That's what brought me off the road. Okay. So through my travels, I fell in love and met the woman that was to become my wife, who was my wife for 20 years. We're not together anymore.
And we fell in love. We kept traveling. So when we met, I was traveling, and I said, I'm not settling down. This was, late 20s, early 30s. And she said, fine, I'll come with you. And so we got married and kept traveling around the world together. And then her body clock was ticking.
Right.
She's like, I want to have kids. And I said, great, I want to be a dad. Let's do that. So when she got pregnant for the first time, that was when I had to go, oh,
okay, this is real. It's getting real now.
Yeah, I got to support these kids now. We've got to settle down. We have to put them through school. I've got to earn some proper money and provide. I've got to move into this archetype of provider.
Right.
So we did. So we settled down, and I didn't know what to do, but I'd been traveling for 10 years. So I got a job with an international travel company, and then began my suit and tie chapter.
Right.
And I put on a shirt and a tie for the first time. And I played that game, and I played it really well, and I got into senior leadership, and I ended up the last 3 years of my employment with that company. I was a senior leader. I had 150 staff. My business that I'd bought into was turning over $100 million a year, and all of the pressures that come with that corporate life, that incessant pressure to drive net profit growth quarter on quarter.
Right.
And if you're not driving that net profit growth, very quickly you're irrelevant and you are out. So the pressure that brings, and we move away from our values because we have to do what we have to do to drive that growth. So we start behaving in ways that are not truly aligned with our sensibility. And I started drinking way too much to numb that. And I was working 14 hours a day. The old story. I was earning great money. I was flying business class.
Right.
I was, but I wasn't happy. I was deeply unhappy, and I was pretending to the outside world that I was happy, and I was playing that game, right?
Right.
So you've got the house with the white picket fence and the 2 kids and the high paying corporate job, and everyone goes, oh yeah, you're successfully doing what we're told we should do, but deeply, deeply unhappy. And it's interesting, Jim, now working with people who are still in that world.
Yeah.
And finding people who have created all this wealth and they're deeply empty and unhappy.
Right.
Anyway, so that was me until my midlife crisis / opportunity when I lost everything and started the next chapter. Yeah.
I see. And so, well, when you say that, I don't know if we talked about that before. When you lost everything, what does that mean? Was there something like you decided to quit your job, or what happened? Or
I didn't decide. I got kicked out.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
that happens. Hey,
very unceremoniously.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. No. So look, So one step back from that.
Yeah.
So it's 2012. I'm still employed, and had been still getting great results. We brought in, so the senior leadership team brought in an external coach, and we did a weekend retreat or workshop leadership retreat with him. And this was my introduction to stuff that I love now. This was my introduction to human behavioral profiling,
right,
neuro-linguistic programming, coaching as a modality, all of these things. And I just loved it. I was lapping it up. This guy stood in front of us, and he was like a magician. Within an hour, he had us all pegged. He knew us behaviorally. He knew how each of us as individuals would think and make decisions and behave. And he was summing us all up, and it was like I was at a magic show. And how do you do that?
Right.
That's fascinating.
Interesting. Yeah.
And he was teaching us cool stuff around leadership. And on one of the lunch breaks, I said to him, man, this is so cool. What do you do? And he said, this is what I do. I teach this stuff. I said, this is for me. This is for me. And it's interesting at the time, I was the succession plan for my boss. So she had said to me, I'm grooming you to come into the state manager role. And so I went home to my then wife and said, right, this thing coaching, I love it. I'm going to do it. But one day, I'm going to do a couple more years here in the corporate wheelhouse, and I'm going to build up my coaching, skills and ability. And then once I've been at the exec level, then I'm going to leave this company and I'm going to go and start my own coaching business.
I see.
I said that in the November. In the January, I got turfed.
Yeah.
So I lost my job. I then had to lose the house that we'd built. Couldn't afford to keep the house that we'd built.
Right.
And my marriage had to come to an end as well.
Wow. Okay.
So when I say I lost everything, I mean it. I lost my career, I lost my house, I lost my marriage. And the only thing I kept was my 2 kids, 50-50. So we were I was week on, week off with my 2 boys, who were 9 and 7 at the time. I had a guitar, a surfboard, and my 2 boys.
Wow.
And $100,000 of debt.
Wow.
That was it. And nothing else. I mean, not even a knife or fork or spoon. not any linen. Not nothing. No plates. No nothing. So when we found a house to rent, we moved into an empty house. I was like, oh, gee, wow, I need everything again.
Yeah, what do I do now? You know what? Did that kind of resonate, or did that make you think about your earlier days when you previously had nothing? Was it like kind of like a full circle moment or something where you're like, man, after all this time and whatever, I'm right back where I started out, maybe like in the middle of India with nothing.
Yeah. And I was fine with it because it's like, I know we'll be okay. I've got my kids and we'll figure this out.
Right.
We'll figure this out. It's funny, actually. I reverse engineered a Facebook platform that we have here. You probably have the similar groups over there.
Sure.
So I live in a place called the Surf Coast.
Okay.
It's a stretch of surf beaches with lots of surfers. And there's a Facebook group here called Surf Coast Free Stuff. And it's people who are recycling. They're just giving stuff away. And so the premise of this Facebook group is that if you've got a washing machine that you don't want anymore, rather than taking it to landfill, you put it on Surf Coast Free Stuff and say, does anyone want a washing machine? So I thought, well, rather than giving stuff away, because I've got nothing to give, I'm going to go on there and ask. Excuse me. So I went onto this Facebook group and and I said, hey, single father, 2 kids, and I need everything. I've got nothing. And it was actually quite remarkable what happened. The community came together on this post, and it ended up, not only did I fill the house with everything that I needed secondhand, and I mean everything.
Wow.
Knives, forks, linen, beds, mattresses, washing machines, dishwashers. You think of everything that you have in a house. Right. I got given all of it.
Wow.
And none of it matched, but I didn't care. Because I don't care about that. And anyway, but not only did I end up filling the house, but it ended up creating this community conversation, and people were jumping on going, oh, wow, aren't we wonderful? It was a real feel-good
that's really cool.
Conversation online. Yeah.
Way to make friends and just feel part of something when you've lost everything. Jeez, I mean, that's...
Yeah, it was
incredible.
Great. The community came together, and so that was lovely. And, you were talking before, Jim, about how uncomfortable 2021 was for you. And when we understand and then lean into the uncomfort zone, we could call it, right? Because any growth, if you're someone who actually values personal growth, i.e. you want to learn, you want to learn some things that you don't know already.
Right.
You want to expand into your potential, let's say.
Right.
If you're someone who values becoming more of yourself, of what you can be, that only happens in the uncomfort zone.
Right.
You never learn anything in the comfort zone because by definition, you're comfortable there because you know everything there.
Right.
So when you remember that it's, growth and learning and development is synonymous with being uncomfortable, then you start to actually relish being uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Right? When I'm uncomfortable, to me, that now means potential for growth.
Right. Well,
so being uncomfortable is kind of become more comfortable, if that makes sense.
being more comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? Well,
that's right. Yeah.
I was going to say that's one of your your magic shifts in perspectives. I think that you help people with. Where most people think like, I don't want to be uncomfortable no matter what. Wow. Well, what a story, man. I didn't know that part of that you really lost everything and had to, kind of claw your way back. So obviously once you're in the new house, you've had the separation, you've lost the job, whatever. This is the time where you start to go all in on coaching and think like, okay, this is the time to make it happen, right?
Yeah, that's right. There's two things that I think are important, and the reason I want to share this is because for your listeners, a lot of them will resonate with this, and I want to help you. If you're listening to this and you resonate with this, I want to help you through this. So the lead up, subconsciously for me, very personally, psychologically, subconsciously, there had been a background belief that I wasn't good enough, and that I'm not enough.
Yeah.
Right? Now, this wasn't just unique to me. This is a very human thing, right? It leads to the imposter syndrome. It leads to us having this feeling that if we've created some success, that we're going to get found out, or do I really deserve this much success? Or I've already sabotaged it before it's happened because I don't believe that I do deserve it. And so I realized at this time, that was the awakening part. I realized, oh wow, I've been running this racket subconsciously that I'm not enough. So I need to sort that out. And I went and found a whole bunch of books around how to rewire the brain and blah, blah, blah. So at the same time as losing my job, losing my house, losing my marriage, I also realized I needed to change my beliefs around self. And so I went to work on recreating a belief that I am enough, just the way I am, right? So I'm doing this work at the same time as losing my job. I said, right, this is now, I'm going to take the small handshake I got from this organization. They gave me a small payout, and I'm going to take that money and I'm going to invest in becoming a qualified coach and studying human behavior and NLP and all this stuff. So I did. I went and threw myself in the deep end of studying, and at the same time started my own business. And people were saying to me, you're crazy. You've got nothing. You've got a lot of debt you need to pay off. Just go and get another corporate job and do the coaching thing later.
Right.
And I said, no.
I was going to say that would have been a move that most people probably would make. It's like, I need money now. I don't care. I'm going to go work at Starbucks or something. Who cares?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, I was so adamant about my new life path in terms of both personally and professionally that I lost my house over it.
Wow.
The house I'd built.
Yeah.
We built this house. And I had to lose the house to go on my new path.
Wow.
But I was so determined to do it. And so I did.
Yeah.
And it took a while, but the interesting thing was, Jim, that as I started to rewire and actually believe my own brainwashing that I'm good enough and I deserve, abundance and success and happiness and health, it all started to come. That's when things changed. Yeah. So when I really actually believed that I am enough, then this amazing woman showed up in my life.
Right.
And to this day, we are together. We've been together for 6 years now, and our relationship is next level.
Awesome.
Really, really next level.
Yeah.
It's quite stunning. And over the time, our 4 teenagers have come to be happily blended. They're fine now. It wasn't easy to begin with.
Sure.
You can imagine it's not easy as a young person to be thrown into a family that's twice the size of what you were used to, and your parents have split up, and now they're repartnering, and so it wasn't easy for the kids, but they're all good now. Our kids are 18 and 16, 15 and 13, and they're all completely fine now, which is great. But so when I changed my belief about myself, that's when I attracted this stunning, amazing, beautiful, gorgeous woman who thinks that I'm everything.
Right.
And then my work started to change, and I started to create abundance, and now I'm in a position where I'm earning more money, way more money than I ever earned in the corporate world, doing something that I really care about, that I love doing. And I'm not working crazy hours. Now, I've got so much time to be the single parent with my kids. We surf a lot. We camp a lot. We hang out a lot, right? I'm living the dream life. And before COVID, my partner and I fly around the world running retreats in beautiful locations, which is my ideal. So I'm paying myself to help people change their lives in a positive way, going to beautiful locations around the world and doing it. I'm like, wow, pinching myself going, whoa, this is real, right? This is real. But the point to your listeners is that, yes, I'm creating this ideal life for me, but what had to come first was the relationship with self.
That's right.
Was really doing the work on myself to understand that you are enough. You have everything you need to create your ideal life, but you've got to know that first.
Right. Well, for sure. I mean, it's just, It kind of gives me chills just listening to your story, because it's obviously it mirrors a lot of some of the experiences I've had. I'm sure everyone's had some experience out there with not believing in themselves enough or whatever. I don't know if that just comes from your family, your parents, or life in general, or whatever, or maybe it's part of the ego. You're always a little bit afraid because it's you're trying to keep yourself alive, right? And so that's the thing that is one of the biggest challenges to overcome, is our own mindset, getting out of our own way. And I've always had this little bit of notion that, like, if I worked hard enough, I could do things. But, growing up, I had a more traditional path. I kind of stayed in that for a while. I kind of half stepped out of it. Maybe around 2006, I quit my job, my corporate job. And so I haven't had a job since then, been consulting and stuff. But over the last maybe 5 or 6 years, I'm trying to step it up into this bigger, fruitful zone, like you were just describing, where it's like, when you really start to double down on your mindset, really open up, really flush everything out, it's amazing how the abundance really starts showing up, pouring out, and you're happy. And the changing your sets of friends and whoever you interact with, doing things you never imagined. I've been traveling the world. That's like one of the things, like, if you just sit around, like what would I like to do? I'd like to see more parts of the world. Well, why wasn't I doing that earlier? I have no idea, but I do it now, which is fun and it's cool, and I can do it economically and whatever. I figured out all those things you think that are roadblocks to it, that are in your mind. You start to really knock those down, and it's amazing when that happens. Well, cool. Jem, thanks so much for being on the podcast. But before we get out of here, there's always a couple more pointed questions I like to ask people, because of just the way the world's turning these days. One is about technology and how you think about technology. So, when you got thrown out of the corporate world, let's say, and your marriage happened or whatever, you had to really reinvent yourself. And part of that, at least over the last couple of years now with the pandemic, has been more tech focused. Were you? Did you embrace technology early on when you were younger, or did you come to it what was the challenge or the just maybe your methodology in terms of like figuring out how to podcast, figuring out how to build your own website, how to just to dig in and lean into technology, knowing the fruitfulness of it?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think it comes with the mindset around change anyway, which I have been developing. So I'm not a tech native. I'm turning 51 in a couple of months.
Right.
So when I was going through high school, computers were these big, chunky box things, and we were writing in DOS. Remember DOS?
Right. Yeah.
It's code, and there was no such thing as a smartphone. When I was traveling back in the 90s, when I was backpacking around the world, I didn't even have email. Email only came about while I was traveling. I used to say to people, if you want to communicate with me, I think I'm going to be in Calcutta in a month, send a letter to the poste restante, to the GPO, and I might get it. Okay?
Oh my gosh.
But what I was understanding and learning about was that change is inevitable. Right? In fact, there's only two things that are definite. And it's not death and taxes, because you can avoid taxes, right? You can go and live in tax havens. Right. It's death and change.
Death and change, right. Yeah.
100% happening whether you like it or not.
Right.
Right. And there's change that happens that we don't like, but it's going to happen.
Right.
I mentioned earlier that my best friend died on his motorbike when I was 18. When I was 38, my little brother died on his motorbike when he was 30 years old.
Wow.
That change I did not want.
Yeah.
And it hurt massively. But it's coming, people, whether you like it or not.
Right.
Now, you can resist change if you want to, and that's what the ego does. Our sense of identity is fearful, and it's trying to protect us, and change is the unknown, and the unknown is potentially dangerous. So our ego, in order to protect us, will resist change. But resisting change equals suffering.
Right.
Right? You dig your heels into change, you're going to suffer. It's going to hurt. It's not pleasant. So one step better to resisting change is to embrace change. Right? That's easier.
Right.
You embrace change and your life gets a little bit easier.
Right.
But then one step that's even more functional than that, I believe, is to design change.
I like that.
Right. Where can I design the change? What can I change that's going to help me be even more relevant
Right.
in this changing time and space, right? So I'm not a tech native, but if I come across some technology that's going to help me on my mission and it's going to help me help more people, I'm adopting that for sure,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And so, for example, through the lockdowns, I said before I was face to face, realizing I needed to bring everything online. It was wonderful. I'm like, right, teach me how to do this. I want to know how to do this, right? Because I'm on a mission to help more people. And all of a sudden, my capacity doubled. I wasn't driving around to all of my clients. I'm sitting here, like I'm sitting here with you now, and finding a way to be relevant. And also my clients that were spread across distance, so we can bring all of the regional managers together in a workshop like that.
Right.
Here's a Zoom link. Jump on. We're here. Rather than the logistics of having to get everybody to drive hundreds of kilometers to the city to come and all be in the same meeting room together. So let's do that. Let's easily record and create online product. All of these tech companies have been loving COVID.
Sure.
So yeah, look, I'm not a native or a natural with the digital world, but I definitely am up for adopting it. And if you keep your mind sharp through always learning, every time you're learning something new neural sequences are firing, right? This is good for our brains.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. So you going and learning these new jazz scales, that's good for your brain, right? It's keeping you sharp. Yeah. And so we stay sharp. And then even as we get older, we can learn new things. And I'll just call in, the younger generation who, for them, this is natural. My kids, my older boy turned 18 yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And my younger boy is about to be 16. And my partner's kids. And I'll ask them, boys, show me how to use this or that.
Right.
So look, I love it. I love technology. I think that, technology is not bad. It's people behind the tech and what they do with it.
Sure.
Social media as an idea is not bad. It's the incentives and the algorithms that are designed behind it to have us addicted to gain our attention.
Right.
And then, this whole surveillance capitalism idea where they're making money from creating very, very detailed profiles on us so they can sell to advertising companies. That's the bit I don't like.
Right.
The actual idea of having a social media platform.
Oh, the way to connect is phenomenal, I think.
It's not bad.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And we'll learn through it, but
change.
Well, that's interesting because it's, I think one of the things I heard you say there was about your mission of, connecting and serving and whatever, and that helps bring you into learning technologies or dealing with that stress of change. Right. It, get you out of just the suffering part of like this, all this stuff is coming at me and I don't want to accept it, but if you focus on your mission, you'll be like, hey, you know what?
Focus
I need to learn
mission.
this.
Yeah. 100%. Get your North Star. And make sure that North Star is something that you are passionate about, something that you care about.
Right.
Something, can I swear on your podcast?
Not, well, sure. Why not?
But it's something that you give a shit about.
Right.
Right?
Sure.
Something that you actually care about.
Right.
Find that thing. You get to make this up, by the way. I don't think this is some preordained thing. I think that you get to make up your own sense of mission in your life beyond survival, right? So of course survival comes first, right? We need to feed the kids. I get it. Mm-hmm. Once you've got enough resource to put food on the table and you've got some shelter, then you go, right, now what do I care about beyond survival?
Right.
What is an aspect of life that I'm passionate about, and how can I use what I'm naturally good at, my natural talents or my learnt and acquired skills? How can I use them to serve this mission? Right? Because when you have a mission, this circles all the way back to the start of our conversation, Jim, around resilience. Right?
Right.
A big part of our resilience, a big part of our fuel in the tank to get up on those tough days and to go through the uncertainty of change and to go through the adversity. A big part of the fuel in the tank is having a mission, having a purpose beyond yourself.
Right.
How can I make a difference? And when you've got that and you care about it, then not only is it the fuel in the tank, but it's the guidance. Which direction should I go in? Well, there's my North Star. Right? Now, how am I going to get there? I'm going to embrace this technology, or I'm going to embrace this new cultural, environmental imposition.
Right.
You know, I'm gonna embrace all of it. I'm gonna find a way through it because I'm determined to serve this mission.
Yeah, it makes sense, and it's part of that. It's like feeling like more aligned. Like when you find your mission, and then you feel like, you know what, I'm more aligned. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. This is my mission in life. Like life seems to get easier, I think.
Yeah, then you're finding flow again. You're finding flow again.
Right. You're back in your flow. Exactly. Yeah. That's cool.
Because you're taking your mind off being conscious in the moment of, I have to consciously do this thing here. You've got this higher purpose.
Right.
Let's call it a mission. And you're like, right, I know why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Right.
When I know why I'm doing what I'm doing, now I'm going to come back into the moment and I'm just going to apply myself to the best of my ability in this given moment because I've got this sense of purpose.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, that's really motivating when you find that. Awesome. Well, I have one final question for you. Through all these, reinventions that you've had in your life already, sure there's more to come, but can you share a reinvention revelation, something that, with the audience, something that you learned about yourself through all these transitions that you wouldn't have known previously, about yourself or about business, and starting your own business?
Yeah, sure. In some way, shape or form, the common denominator through all these reinventions is your deepest sense of self. And that when we can curate this identity, this ego in a functional way. So I'm going to identify as the type of person that I want to be. I'm not going to identify as the vehicles that I use. So I'm not going to identify as her partner or that corporate role that I played or their father or a surfer or a tech, an IT guy. I'm not going to identify as those things because they come and go. And when I have a period of reinvention, those things are not around anymore. So if I've identified with them, again, I find myself tripping over and not knowing who I am. So what I've learned is that if you foster and curate a sense of identity that can't ever be taken away from you. So it's something to do with your core values. So Jim, my sense of identity, if you ask me, Jem, who are you? I'll tell you I'm a kind, caring, passionate, driven, action-taking, generous, loving man. That's who I am. Everything I just used to describe me then can't be taken away from me. It's a choice. I get to wake up in the morning and choose to be that person. Right. Now, regardless of whether I'm with my partner or not, regardless of whether I'm a coach or not, regardless of whether I'm still surfing or not, none of those things are my sense of identity. They're all just vehicles.
Right. Oh, that makes sense. I like that. Yeah, that it really speaks to me because I've been kind of I've been getting into meditation the last couple of years, and the way I hear what you're saying is, it's about sort of detaching from all that stuff and kind of being more the observer of your life. I don't know how to describe it, really, but being like, I do all those things, but it's not exactly me.
It's not exactly who I am.
It's not right. It's not exactly me. It's part of what I do.
Yeah, that's right.
Right,
and not identifying with it is what you're saying.
Yeah,
I'm not going to identify with that because those things come and go.
Right.
You think about it. If you identify in your relationships, I'm so and so's husband or wife.
Right.
Or I'm so and so's brother or son or daughter or whatever. If that's your identity, what happens when that person's gone? What happens to you?
Right.
Because everybody we know is going to die, 100%.
100%,
definitely. And we don't know when.
Right. I mean,
we don't know when, right? But we know it's going to happen, right? So if my sense of identity is enmeshed in that relationship, what happens when they're not around?
Right.
My identity takes a hit.
Right.
Or if I've identified as an accountant, if that's part of my identity, what happens when I retire? I don't know who I am because I'm not an accountant anymore. Right. So the idea is that, and this is what you're saying through meditation, you've started to spend time when you're in a meditative state, you've started to spend time observing all of this stuff and remembering that you exist beyond
it,
before and after all of the stuff.
Right.
Right. The stuff is a little bit less consequential. The stuff's just the stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even though, like, beforehand, especially if you're a musician, like, played music when you were younger, you said.
Yeah.
I know a lot of musicians where it's like they're all in. It's 100%. It's like they're one and the same. It's how they feel about it. So passionate about it. And I've been like that for many years. I still one of my biggest loves of life is playing music. It's saved my life a million times, literally.
Yeah.
And it's been my meditation all these years until like now that I'm actually trying to figure out meditation more specifically.
Yeah.
But I feel good that I figured out that, what, if I can't play music tomorrow, it's okay. I'm okay with it.
That's so good.
You know what I mean? Where other people, I still think, they would their life would be over.
Yeah, absolutely. And imagine, so you play the saxophone, right?
Yep.
If you had identified, if that was part of your identity, part of who I am is I'm a saxophonist. Then what would happen one day if you got arthritis in your fingers so bad that you couldn't play that instrument anymore?
Right.
Your identity, you'd be like, who am I? If I can't play the saxophone, who am I? You'd take a hit. And for some people, that identity hit is so strong that they can slip into depression.
Right. Yeah.
Because they don't know who they are anymore.
Right.
So I would suggest exactly what you're saying through meditation, that you can remember that you are who you are before, beyond, and after playing the saxophone.
Right. Well, we're all going to lose our abilities or skills at some point. I mean, I think about it all the time. Like, how many more years can I really play and go and gig and whatever? And, a lot of the inspirations in my life have been, like more on the jazz and blues scene, because I've always seen those guys. I mean, they play till they drop dead, basically. They're in their 90s, still out there gigging. I mean, it's insane to me.
Yeah.
But I always thought, like, I want to be that guy or girl versus, a traditional old person that just sits on the couch and watches TV and, collects their whatever, Social Security or whatever. It's like, but at some point, you're going to just lose it and not be that person anymore. And so I just
maybe in 30 years from now, you can call me up and say, hey, let's have another chat.
Yeah, right. Well, maybe I'll need you, man. So I'll need your services for sure at some point. I'm thinking, but anyways, Jem, hey, it's been awesome having you on the podcast. Thanks for sharing your story and your background. I didn't understand some of that stuff. It's you've had some really, really heavy experiences, but cool experiences, and it's led to your fruitfulness now, man, and the abundance that you're in, and it's awesome. It comes across. So really appreciate it. Hope everybody out there listening will dig you. If people are looking to connect with you and they want to find you somewhere, where would you tell them to go?
Look, go to my website, jemfuller.com.
Okay.
Actually, at the moment, we're just about to start building a group of leaders who are interested in communication for the modern leader. So I mean, post-COVID. I think that we're really going to need to look at how do we upgrade and evolve and expand our communication as leaders. So if you're interested to be a part of that conversation, I'm going to form, a Facebook group. I'm going to form an email group where I'm sharing ideas on this. If you would like to hear what this is about, just email me, Jem, Jem, Jem at jemfuller.com. Shoot me an email and say, Jem, I'm interested in this communication for leaders stuff that you're putting together, and I'll put you on the list and you'll start receiving some cool information about that. If you're interested in the book, just go to amazon.com and grab The Art of Conscious Communication for Thoughtful Men by Jem Fuller. I would love it if you would read the book. There's a lot of good stuff in there. I'm on a mission to get that book to as many people as possible because I believe it'll help. So that's how you can find me. I'm on all the socials as Jem Fuller, Instagram, LinkedIn, etc.
Very cool. And all those links and references will be in the show notes, so you can find those there. Jem, thanks again. Awesome.
Jim, thank you so much, man.